So for some perspective on this, we turn again to Perdita Felicien, who we're very lucky to have in the building with us today, CBC Sports Olympic commentator. She's also a retired two-time world champion hurdler. She joins me now in the studio once again. So no ban, no blanket ban, up to the individual sports federations, between 25 and 30, everything from tennis to sailing to judo. What's your reaction to this decision?
That the IOC was not strong enough to make this decision on their own. This is their party, their game. So if anyone's invited or not invited, they can say who. You have this damning report from WADA and Mr. McLaren. And so the evidence is before you. This tells me that they don't want to take that kind of responsibility. They don't want to have the consequences of the fallout, and so they're allowing the member federations to do it so they can kind of still keep their hands clean. And later on, if it all falls apart, which it might, then they can say, well, it wasn't up to us in the end.
But we are days away from the start of the games. I mean, you're packing your bags to go there to cover it for CBC. What are the chances that any individual federation would rule against a Russian athlete this close to the games?
This is a recipe for disaster. With just 12 days to the games, I think what we're going to see happen is if member federations are left to make this decision, all these athletes are not going to have the same standard of scrutiny. So we know when it comes to weightlifting in Russia, there are so many positive tests. When it comes to judo, their leader, their member federation leader has already said, well, Russia is a great part of the legacy of judo, so I can't see them being out. I don't think that should happen. So really, I think we're going to have an instance where you're going to have athletes who probably shouldn't be allowed to compete be there. And I want to make this clear. There's no perfect solution. There's no perfect answer. Everything that I've said this morning is my personal opinion. And I think whatever decision the IOC made this morning, you are going to leave people angry.
But you're coming from a place of a broadcaster, a journalist, and a former Olympian who understands exactly what the stakes are in all this. So what does this message send to the entire sporting world?
I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed this morning because I think the IOC had an opportunity to say, we're putting clean athletes first. They had the opportunity to say, we are going to be strong and stand up to this zero tolerance policy that we have. But the fact to me that they weren't even able to do that tells me ethically the evidence is there that says they can, but politically they just don't want to rock the boat that way. I'm disappointed.
Are we looking at potential chaos here in terms of
yeah.
So walk us, I mean, what does this mean to the sports organizations?
Well, sports organizations are probably, their leaders are in Rio, getting things prepared, getting things ready. This is a logistics probably nightmare now, because now you're going to have all these cases that you have to review. It might be easier for them to say, yes, let them all compete, or no, let them not compete. But now to have to actually scrutinize all these petitions in 12 days, I don't see how they're going to get that done. And like I said, I think what's going to happen is every member federation, from judo to swimming to gymnastics, are going to have their own way of policing this and letting athletes in, and it's not going to be fair across the board.
In situations like this, it's always good to follow the money, and these individual federations are not necessarily very wealthy. The IOC is. So is that what is going on there in terms of lawsuits, in terms of potential people hiring their lawyers, all of this, fighting this fight? Is it almost impossible for these federations, if they did want to prevent individual Russians from attending, to prevent them simply because they couldn't afford to fight it?
I think the member federations are going to try and do their best, but I don't think they have the resources with this amount of time. The blame really, to me, comes down to to WADA somewhat and the IOC, because we've known about Russian doping since at least 2013. There's been evidence. They didn't follow up until the end of last year in 2015. So there's hardly any more hours left in a day to make this thing right. And literally less than 2 weeks before the Olympics, we're having this conversation. There's not enough time to do this in a very transparent or fair way. And I think you're going to probably see a lot of heads rolling after the Olympics are done. And look, we're not even talking about the athletes per se. We're talking about doping in the lead up to an Olympic Games.
So these games in Rio, no matter who is allowed ultimately or not allowed to go, is the 2016 Rio Games always going to be there with an asterisk next to any records, any athletes, any medal winners?
You are asking me the hard questions, which is why I'm here. I think in the mind of the public, it might. In the eyes of the athletes who are competing, I think a lot of them who are innocently there and have it shot are going to be upset if there's a Russian athlete beside them. I don't believe that the Russian flag should be waved in any capacity in Rio based on what they've done to the Olympic movement. They have to me, committed the worst crime that there is. So I think the athletes there who are more probably invested than any of us watching, the innocent ones, are going to be truly upset, and I think they have a right to be.
Perdita, the passion you have for the purity of sport really shines through. Thank you so much for being there with us today. Perdita Felicien is a CBC Sports Olympic commentator and former Olympic athlete.